I'm Alan Jackson, the pastor of World Outreach Church in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I am a husband and a grandfather of 3. And when I look back over my life, there have been a consistent number of times where God provided a voice. Sometimes it's been a relatively brief interaction. Maybe it was somebody that I knew and I would trust and receive what they had to say to me. Other times God put somebody that walked alongside of me for a season. But I could tell the story of my spiritual journey in terms of the voices that God has provided. Now, I typically wanted a choir. I wanted 100 people clapping, saying, "This is the way, walk in it." And God's never given me a choir, but He has always provided me with a voice. And so I think the challenge is to be willing to listen and then to have the courage to be that voice in somebody else's life. You know, when Paul wrote to the churches, he said, "The things you saw in me and heard in me, do those." Every time I read that, it gives me cold chills. To stand in front of somebody and say, "Look, what you see me do, and you go do that." You know, we'll say that about golf, or we'll say that about hunting, but most of us have our knees buckled when we come to our faith with a conversation like that. If we're not living in a way where our spiritual life is worthy of being duplicated, go get on your face and tell the Lord you're sorry. It's not that we're perfect or we know all the answers. Lord knows I don't know all the answers and I'm far from perfect. But I want to be serving the Lord in a way that it's worthy of being emulated in the lives of someone. So I think it is devastating that we've allowed the church to exist in terms of conversion model, and that if you're converted, your business with God is done and you're absolved of all responsibility. Jesus said if we don't bear fruit, we're only good to be cut down and thrown into the fire. So I don't think mentoring is for super Christians or hyper Christians. I think all of us will give an account for the influence of our lives. And if you haven't been doing it on purpose, by all means, begin to think about doing it on purpose. There's some entry-level ways. You include somebody with you in a worship event. When you're doing something that is a social function, you bring your faith to bear into that. I mean, mentoring can take place on a whole lot of different levels. But if you're not mentoring people with your faith, I don't want to stand before the boss with that record. None of us come from perfect families. You know, every family is fractured. Some are more intact than others, but every family has stresses. The ones that you think are perfect, you just don't know enough about. And don't allow the enemy to convince you that because of brokenness in your family system or in your own personal journey, that you are somehow second class. The purpose of the redemptive work of Jesus is to make the ground at the foot of the cross truly level. Whether you come from the perfect nuclear family or you come from some hybrid that is far less than that. Jesus had a borrowed dad, and his story turned out okay. So I believe that in spite of the brokenness in our lives, God can bring you forward. If in the sincerity of your heart you say to the Lord that I want to know you, and help me to recognize the people that are within my sphere of contact, that have an aspect of character or faith that would strengthen my own journey. I have found God to be amazingly faithful at opening the doors for those relationships. And when I talk to men about their influence on the lives of others, I think there's a reluctance I hear a lot of times. People say, I'm not a biblical scholar, or there's so many things I don't know, or what if somebody asks me a question that I can't answer? And my first response is always the same. I want to give you my favorite answer. I don't know. That's not a declaration of failure or inadequacy. I found freedom in realizing that there is a God and it's not me. And oftentimes when you decide to serve people and serve with people, there will be things that happen which are inexplicable. I don't know why bad things happen to good people. I don't understand all the things that God chooses to put in our lives. What I have said is I'll walk with you through it. And I'll celebrate with you when there are victories, and I'll weep with you when there are tragedies. And I will pray in humility that God will make a pathway through the most painful seasons that life brings, and they brings all of us. But I don't care. I'm a pastor, and I've done this for a long time. And I've learned some things, but one of the things I have learned is that I don't have the answer for everybody's circumstance. And I don't want to pretend that. And if you wait until you have all the answers to start the journey, you'll never get started. You know, adults learn incrementally. So if I could talk to the guys that I said, look, get in the game. You'll learn more once you're in the game than you will watching 1,000 people play. Well, go influence somebody. Go put yourself on the line join somebody on the journey and say, let's see if we can learn to honor God more in the marketplace where we work, or in the school where we go, or in the neighborhood where I live. And it's a mess. It's not easy. It's muddy and confusing, but God will help us. It's not about being perfect. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I don't have all the answers, but let's go learn some together.